Shalom. Call hello, Yahweh by Hashem Shai by Hashem Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles, double honors unto the elder bishops. Salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so, now more so than ever. To the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth among the heathens that look like the heathens, and to the Akwath that are listening and learning, to you, I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm from the branch of the Great Millstone, coming at you another lesson in truth. And I got to give a shout out to one of my subscribers, a brother, the Ohio player, Shalom, brother. It was something that he posted that brought me to this video, which was very informative, and basically just Esau telling on himself as usual. Matter of fact, let's grab that. This is Psalms 64 and 8. Let's go to it. And it reads, "So they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves, and all that see them shall flee away." So this guy, Kyle Harper, goes into the breakdown of monogamy, where it came from and why it was used. And, and he touches on history, and he actually tells on himself. He tells on the Edomites and when they made certain changes to history, and, when the whole white superiority doctrines were developed to hide real history, to cover up things that they didn't want to be made known. I always tell you that they're very ashamed of what happened during the Dark Ages. Hence the reason why they talk about, life a million years ago, 60 million years ago, and then billions of years and all that mess, because they want to deny that during the Dark Ages they were, the troglodyte Geico cavemen. That, that curse fell upon them when on thy belly thou shalt go. At the fall of Rome, and then after that period, they came back into power about 1,000 years later during the Renaissance. The fact that you have a Renaissance is the evidence that there was a break in their rulership from this, because in here you can see it in his video. It's talking about, Homer and Greek monogamy, and did monogamy survive Rome? And well, he's going to go into that stuff. All right. So and I found this video too with Jordan Peterson, Enforced Monogamy. That was right under it. That was pretty interesting as well. But we're going to go into this video with Kevin Harper here, or Kyle Harper, and then I'm going to give a commentary. So let me check the sound. All right. Okay. And none of the above. Get off my screen. I'm not interested. Come on, man.
About 2 years ago, a pair of economists were sitting at a cafe in Belgium when they were sipping a glass of wine when they had an insight. This is how the best insights always happen. They realized that in some of the world's cultures that had practiced polygamy until very recent times, and in some cases still do, Muslims and Mormons, also prohibited wine drinking. And being economists, they decided to gather a bunch of data and see if there was, in fact, any real correlation there. And in fact, they discovered that there is a robust correlation between a society's patterns of alcohol consumption and its marriage system. Wine bibbing and monogamy are strongly interlinked, and polygamy and teetotaling go hand in hand. All right, I know what you're thinking. I know what y'all are thinking too. Is it true that there's something magic about that fermented grape juice that makes you fall in love and stay with the same person forever? Or, does staying with the same person forever drive men to dig trenches, plant vines, harvest the grapes, crush them, put the runoff in barrels, wait a year, and then drink it? Well, the paper was published in the American Association of Wine Economists, and the answer answer is neither. In fact, it's a spurious correlation. There is no causal relationship between marriage systems and alcohol consumption. And in fact, this strong correlation, which does exist, but isn't a causal relationship, is related to a deeper set of cultural practices, a deeper cluster that explains it. Let me give you a parallel example. There's a very strong correlation between the density of Indian casinos and Brahms restaurants. And for that matter, Kevin Durant jerseys and football coaches named Stoops. None of these cause each other. They're related to a deeper cluster of cultural practices called Oklahomanism, of which I am a great partisan. And if we ever wised up here in Oklahoma and decided to take over the rest of the world and civilize it, you would see Brahms restaurants and Riverwinds all over the globe. And that's what happened with wine and monogamy. They go back, in fact, to one crucial moment where they were put together by the Romans, in fact. The Romans didn't invent monogamy, and they didn't invent wine. Like everything else, they stole them both and made them their own. And
Exactly, because the Romans are not Romans. The Romans are Edomites, all right? Greece and Rome was stolen from the Etruscans, from the Minoans, from the sons of Japhet, all right? The sons of Japhet are were a melanated and are a melanated race. They're still here. Today, they're just called by different names. Let's go to the evidence folder. One of those names that they're called by today is Hawaiian, Samoan, Pacific Islanders, like they love to claim one of the most famous Pacific Islander is not a Pacific Islander at all. He's a so-called Negro. That would be in the Rock, especially knowing that it's your father that determines your heritage and your nationality. His mother indeed is a Pacific Islander, but her people, all right, the Rock's dear old mom, her people were the Etruscans, all right? These Samoans, these Minoans, the Etruscans of Europe, the true Europeans. This is who Alexander of Macedon conquered, and the sons of Greece, Javan, and then took on their characteristics and their ways of life and started calling themselves the Greeks, and later on began to call themselves the Romans, the same people. So they did indeed still. As a matter of fact, let's get another scripture. This is how they got dominion over the whole earth. All right, let's go to Micah. Went too far. 2 and 2. And it reads, "And they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man and his heritage." So not only do they take your land, but they take your heritage. And this is what Esau Edom has been doing ever since he became a vagabond. He's that thief and that vagabond, running from his destiny, from his punishment, all right, from the just fruits that he deserves for what he's done in the earth. He became that vagabond, and he hasn't identified as Esau Edom ever since he came into power, because when he was a nobody, when he was servants to the Israelites, he was Esau Edom. But once he came into power, he became the Greeks. And every so many century or millennia, they keep changing. All right, so let's let them continue.
Took them with them wherever their great imperialist machine went. And this deep correlation between monogamy and wine is in fact explainable by the fact that they both derive from the great influence of Roman civilization. So it's really amazing. But I want you to think about another aspect of this story that I'm telling, and that's the assumption that underlies it, that polygamy is actually normal. And in fact, this is the case.
It is
Now, when I
normal.
say polygamy, I mean polygyny, which means that one man has simultaneous, plural, legitimate wives. There is such a thing called polyandry, where a woman has multiple husbands. It has existed, but it's vanishingly rare. It hardly ever happens. And it depends a little bit on exactly how you measure whether a
Well,
society.
it caused confusion because if a woman had multiple husbands, she would never know who the actual father, which one of her husbands is the father of a particular child. All right. She's taking on the DNA constantly of all these men in rotation, maybe all at once. Who's the father of her children? You can see why it was vanishingly rare.
Society is polygamous or monogamous, and these things matter, but not in the context of this talk. So if you look at the standard social surveys that try and get a representative sample of the world's different cultures, anywhere from 73 to 93% of the world's societies have been polygamous, which is really extraordinary. You can also just think of the familiar examples, for instance, from the Christian Old Testament or Jewish Bible.
The Jewish Bible. When did the Bible become Jewish? Ask yourself that question. It isn't, and it never was. I repeat, the Bible is not Jewish, and it never was.
Jacob had 5 wives, Esau had 4, David had 18, Solomon had.
Let's go back.
Representative sample of the world's different cultures. Anywhere from 73 to 93% of the world's societies have been polygamous, which is really extraordinary. You can also just think of the familiar examples, for instance, from the Christian Old Testament or Jewish Bible. Jacob had 5 wives, Esau had 4, David had 18, Solomon had 700.
Yep, and 300 concubines.
Wasn't enough, so he had 300 concubines.
And then, of course, they put a bunch of pale people on the screen. They put up rebirth, all right, rebirth art, Renaissance art, to show you the history of a melanated people, a couple thousand years beforehand. All right, these people, they just cannot stop lying. All right, but one thing that is sure here is that, look, the Israelites were a Hebrew people. They were not Jewish. All right. That's something that came much later. That's a whole nother lesson. Abraham was an Israelite. Abraham was a Hebrew. All right. He began to call on the name of the Lord. Abraham and his name and Jacob later on, his son, his seed, his sons who became the patriarchs. And Jacob's name, the Lord's name, is in his name. The name Israel is Yasharallah. The Savior is Yahweh Shai, and the mighty Father himself is Yahweh. All right. This is Genesis 13:4, and it reads, "And unto the place of the altar which he had made, there at first, and there Abraham called on the name of Yahweh." Let's go to 14 and 13 now. All right. And it reads, "And when Abram heard," 14 and 13. "And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol, the brother of Aner, and they were confederate with Abraham." Abraham was a Hebrew. He was not Jewish. Isaac was a Hebrew. He was not Jewish. Jacob was a Hebrew. He was not Jewish. As a matter of fact, the term Jewish simply comes from the term, is really derived from Judah. All right. So there's a horrible error and very disingenuous for them to push that falsehood as a reality, as truth. All right. But let us continue.
This isn't actually that rare for his day and age, an advanced agricultural civilization. And other examples just like this are pretty easy to find. It's also important, the late date at which many societies...
There you go again. All the evidences and all the digs that show you that these people were a people of color, yet they show you Renaissance art, after the fact art, revised art. All right. When they giving you demonstrations or they're giving you imagery of the said subject matter. And it turns out that all of his wives are Edomites, or look like Edomites, I should say. All right, because just because you look this way doesn't mean you're an Edomite. The Israelites, they look like this because of the intermingling. All right.
Become monogamous. Most societies have become monogamous only in the last 200 years. Japan in the 1880s, China in the 1950s. So polygamy has been extremely widespread and extremely common throughout most of human history. Unless you have this one great explanatory factor, which is descent or association with Roman civilization, most societies have been polygamous. And in fact, in the world today, some societies still are polygamous. In the Muslim world in particular, more modernizing states like Turkey don't recognize plural marriages, but more religious-oriented states like Saudi Arabia do. So I think that this is something we don't think about in our ordinary day-to-day lives. We, like other human societies, have this very deeply ingrained habit of thinking that our way of life is natural and normal. What could be more natural or normal? We call it the birds and the bees. You meet a girl in class, you ask her out, you change your Facebook status, you propose to her, you pretend to ask her father's permission, you get married, you have 2.05 children. It's the American dream. It's natural. It seems natural to us, but what I want to emphasize today is that our way of life, our understanding of natural, is a product of the time that we live in. And that truly to understand this time that we live in, we need to think in enormous timescales. And to a deep extent, we, even down to our physiology, are creatures of the world that we inhabit. Right? It's truly, I'm being truly honest and sincere. I don't have to say this. I would rather spend an evening with my wife, my only wife, and a nice bottle of Rhone Red than any other way. Thank you, Julius Caesar. But the answer for how we came to...
And that's where he's caught lying. Esau is a liar and the father of them, because Esau pushed monogamy even as the Romans, as the Greeks. But Esau has never followed monogamy. Never. All right? Especially during the time of slavery, when his kingdom was being built up. But this is 1 Maccabees 1:1. And it reads, "And it happened after Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, the king of the Persian Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece." All right? "And made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth." So he was basically going throughout Europe, slaying and conquering the brown-skinned Europeans, the Etruscans, that, as the evidence we actually showed from the time period, and didn't show you, Renaissance art to try to prove a point of something that happened thousands of years before. All right, let's just jump up to verse 7. It says, "So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they all put on crowns upon themselves, so that their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth." Evils were multiplied in the earth when these Edomites took over Greece and started what they call, what they say, the cradle of civilization. All right, this was a cradle of turning everything upside down.
To be this way, I think, is even deeper than just the single explanation of the Romans. And it requires us, I think, to ask, what is history and how is history performed? We live at a moment in which history is being transformed. We live at a very exciting time intellectually because of things like epigenetics, because of genetics, because of neuroscience, because of endocrinology. We will come to understand the basis of human behavior better than any generation before us. Over the next 10, 20 years, the discoveries will be exciting.
And one of the reasons why they do that is they've also controlled the narrative of history and what is real and what is not. Think about that.
It's starting to affect the way that historians think and the way that historians do their work.
And see, history was in the way, evidence is in the way of truth. I mean, of what, or is in the way of what they want. So they changed it. All right?
Now, when you think of a historian, you think of somebody like Theodor Mommsen, the greatest of all the Roman historians, who looks exactly like a Roman historian should look. I also use a feather pen.
Yeah.
And what is it that
they laughed. Go ahead.
Historians do? Well, they know languages and they study documents. They have deep domain knowledge of a time and place, of a particular civilization or society. That model of history and what history is goes back to the 19th century. The 19th century is when our intellectual landscape in many ways was formed. The 19th century.
So in the 19th century is when a lot of the evidences that were dug up out of the earth proved that they were lying, so they began to change the narrative. All right, prior to the 19th century, actually, in the 17th century, but the 19th century, they really had to buckle down and enforce their newfound white superiority, and they got away from the Bible, and they intermingled the Bible with white superiority, because all of a sudden Ham, Shem, and Japheth became Negroids, Caucasoid, and Mongoloids. All these things that they made up, which put the Caucasoids at the top of everything. They had to change everything up. This is Daniel 7:25, and it reads, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand unto a time and times and the dividing of time." And we're at that time now. That time is almost up, just as all their lies are being exposed.
When geological time was discovered, when it was realized that the Earth was billions and not 6,000 years old.
Right, so that means that they were very well aware of it. And look at them just writing down notes. They're very well aware that the Earth was 6,000 years old, but what they don't acknowledge is that there was 7,000 years of creation. See, 1 year to the Lord is 1,000 years to us. And so that, they had to make those changes in the in their doctrine, because, like I said, the time that they were cave people, well, they would have been exposed. So they had to take that time when they were troglodytes and make it a lot longer than that. They didn't want to give up the history about the wild men and what was happening during the Dark Ages and medieval times before they came back into power, because they had already pushed this power. They had already pushed this white superiority lie, and you couldn't have a society today where you had all these great civilizations in the past that were built by melanated people, even though the evidences of this were all over, the places, in the East, throughout North Africa, throughout Asia, throughout Europe. The evidence of what I'm saying was overwhelming, so they had to change it. All right, and all these melanated people had multiple wives. So if you were going to have white superiority, they couldn't keep up with the breeding of all these people with their multiple wives. So the push of monogamy to force it on the other people, even though the Edomites never practiced it, that was their plan. This is Daniel 8:25. And it reads, "And through his policy, also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand." And not only could he not keep up with all these melanated people having multiple wives, but especially the Israelites. No one can breed like the Israelites. Just look at Ephraim and Issachar. All right, the so-called Puerto Rican, the so-called Mexican, those women just see penis and get pregnant. All right.
Evolution was discovered when people could offer a scientific account of human origins and explain humanity's kinship with the natural world. These were revolutionary. And in that swirl of discovery, certain patterns took shape that deeply influenced the way we do business even today. A certain division of labor emerged in the 19th century in which natural scientists, like biologists and zoologists, would study animal life down to the evolution of Homo sapiens, in which anthropologists...
And then they just made up stuff. All right? There we go with that Ham, Shem, Japheth, and all these false pseudoscience. 1 Timothy 6:20. All right? All that pseudoscience that they created. All right?
This would study principally foraging or hunter-gatherer cultures that were pre-literate, and historians would study written civilization. They would study documents.
There we go with our damn commercial.
Drop in. Breathe in.
And think about how deeply ingrained this is in the way historians still do business. Look at any major academic history department and go look at who their earliest person is.
Let's go back. We'll freeze it there.
Would study written civilization. They would study documents. And
herein lies the lies, all right? Them trying to control the narrative. But this is Isaiah 8:20, and he talks about how all this stuff happened, but Roman society failed. Monogamy failed, and the only reason it survived was through the force of the sword, and what emerged out of that, which was Christianity. But this is Isaiah 8:20. All right, and as you see, that was completely, why would the Bible start off with a man having multiple wives, be fruitful and multiply, to you only having one? And the fact that women outnumber men 7-1 on average around the world. If every man only had one wife, you're leaving a huge portion of the female population without husbands. All right, this is that, which is actually kind of cruel. She's supposed to live her whole life, or she's just gonna be the side broad, or the woman that he cheats with. See, they create all these problems. All right. But the Lord's going to fix all that, because Isaiah 4:1 is going to come to pass. But this is Isaiah 8:20. This is why Rome fell and this society has failed. All right. Isaiah 8:20 reads, "To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. And since they did not and do not follow the light, the law that in this book, all of their societies are going to fail." So with that, I'm going to say, shalom.